Good afternoon, and welcome to Cyber Strategies for Securing the AI Influx, a health system CIO production sponsored by Netscope. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Health Systems CIO, and I will be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll take them later in the program. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to go about 40 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring Brian Cayer, CISO at Keck Medicine of USC, Chris Frenz, longtime health system CISO, Steve Ramirez, VP and CISO with Renown Health, and Damian Chung, VP of Cyber Defense and CSO for Healthcare with Netscope. And then we will have our Q&A. So let's jump right in. Great topic, very important one, obviously. Brian, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your organization and your role?
Yeah, good morning. Brian Cayer, the CISO for Keck Medicine of USC. So Keck Medicine is a multi-hospital health system under the University of Southern California. So you've got the mix between medical, research, and academia.
Excellent, very good. Chris?
Been in healthcare about 25 years now, the last 15 in the role of CISO at various health systems. And with this topic, I kind of feel like I've come full circle. Started my career in healthcare as a drug designer, used to design machine learning algorithms for pharmaceuticals, and got interested in security when I saw the security issues in the AI and machine learning software. And now, 25 years later, a CISO who has to worry about the security issues of AI in a different way.
Excellent. So you've certainly got a lot of thoughts on this topic, and I'm looking forward to hearing them. Steve?
Good morning, Stephen Ramirez, and I'm the CISO at Renown Health, coming up on my 4-year anniversary there. Been in healthcare my entire career as well on the both payer provider and vendor side. And I guess I always like to say I'm cradle to grave from healthcare because my dad's a provider. So basically, since I've been born, I've been around healthcare. So excited to be here and chat with you guys.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. Damian?
Hi, Damian Chung. I'm responsible for Netscope's cyber defense internally, but I also have a deep healthcare background, so I get to speak to a lot of healthcare customers in the field and help them strategize an easier way to secure their data. And thank you to Netscope for sponsoring this event.
All right, excellent. Brian, we're going to start with you. When you consider the many ways AI is being used across healthcare, what are your primary security concerns and why?
So there's more, and a lot of my concerns are usually on data privacy and confidentiality and what we're sharing with AI. So that's part of a big challenge, especially with, when you're looking at the chat GPT capabilities out there and many other tools, right? SaaS-based tools out there that anyone just puts their data in, hey, let me just put this information in. Is it putting in confidential patient data that shouldn't be, shared out, right? Those are some of the concerns I had around how we're using it, what data we're sharing. I had this little thing that says, if you're don't share with the AI that you wouldn't post on publicly on social media, right? Kind of that context. And it's interesting to see, so what people will put out there, and I think that they don't understand the risks that it can put out and what that's doing. And if you're feeding that data into their model, right, and what does that do on the backside? So that's part of it too. And then also, from a security concern too, is what is it? And similarly, in the same boat, is what information is being shared that could be then used to use against our organization, right? So making sure that data is not out there publicly as well, that could be triaged back to our organization. So that's predominantly where I see myself, especially there. And we know too that while the AI has gotten much better, there's still some challenges, right? Like I call it those hallucinations. So if somebody's using it as a factual basis, they need to verify the information before they make a decision on it.
Yeah, and that's where we get into sort of purview. Like, there are going to be different executives that have different responsibilities around these concerns. So hallucinations per se, not so much a security issue, more a data quality, clinical issue, depending. So someone
Right.
else might handle that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got your concerns about the data going in and perhaps it coming out somewhere else on someone else's screen around the globe, right? Somebody dumps in a spreadsheet with some information, someone else does a query that the AI then leverages that data that was put in to answer that query, right? Is this what we're talking about, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but if you want to even go back on, so in the security side of it too, if we're using it and we're using it in the cyber defense model, right? Making sure that if it's going to take action on an event and saying, hey, I'm seeing this activity, doing this, and then take other course of action to say disable the account, do those things, making sure it's appropriate and it's not trying, and that's that other piece is making sure we're reviewing that so it doesn't have a problem, that it doesn't expose us to risk where I inadvertently lock out the surgeon who's doing surgery right then in the OR, right?
Yeah.
So that there's a couple of pieces there. We want to make sure that we're evaluating that, from the cyber, some of the security perspective too, as we start implementing more and more AI into our cyber defense processes.
Yeah, really good number of sort of angles and elements there, and they're distinct. So we'll get into all those. And when you're talking about using it as a sort of almost an autonomous tool, in a
Yeah.
sense, that's agentic, and that's people have concerns certainly on the clinical side, but also you mentioned on the security side. So let's go around the horn. Chris, what are your thoughts?
I definitely agree with everything Brian said. I think one of the things, just to build on what he said, that really stands out to me is the rate at which AI is being adopted. I think a lot of organizations are doing AI just so they can do AI too, and not necessarily evaluating whether AI is the right solution for that particular problem. I think you see a lot of organizations just rushing to adopt AI. And whenever you rush things in, that always leads to a lot of the security issues that Brian was talking about. So one of the things I would caution is that organizations often slow down and actually see, is AI a good fit for this particular problem, or is there a better way to address it?
Yeah, and it makes me think of COVID, right, Chris? I mean, COVID is when there was this rush to implement a lot of telemedicine solutions, and then we had that sort of retrenching of saying, "Hey, we have to security folks, we have to go look back at everything we threw in this emergency type mode to check and see if it's secure." You sounds like you're describing a similar dynamic with AI.
I think it is similar. And I think there's a lot of potential and promise for a lot of AI solutions. But I do think a lot of organizations are rushing to implement them just so they can say they're using AI too.
Yeah, and we'll get into more on that. But that's a very good point. Steve?
Great points by Brian and both Chris as well. I think the biggest piece that we've seen success in is governance, making sure that we're understanding what's coming in, why it's coming in, how it's intended to be used, because that really enables us to really put in the security parameters a little bit better versus the Wild West on we need this product, we need this product. And it goes into a lot, as my CIO famously says, the build versus buy model. Like, do we think that we're one of those organizations that really have the skill sets to build something ourselves, or should we just buy it more aligned to the Epics, the Microsofts, and other trusted partners that we have, because that really has a little bit more embedded security, as well as also setting up additional guardrails for how our end users react. I really like the model of bumper bowling, that we want our end users all hit pins. So that's the same with AI, that we're really putting in confinements, that we're a co-pilot shop. So we're a Netscope shop as well. So we're really using that to help control data loss prevention on where people can and can't go to different provided tools. So really that goes back to governance, making sure that we know the tools that we're enabled to be the pins, more or less, and then the bumpers to everything else that they shouldn't be using with our security controls.
Steve, let me follow up there. Let's go into this idea of governance a little bit. Governance is great. We love it. It should solve every problem. It doesn't. We know there's always been shadow IT, people buying things at a departmental level that maybe you find out after the fact, or maybe you never find out about until there's a problem. It's still the same old challenge, I would assume, sort of herding those sheep and getting everyone through that central function where things can be vetted and checked. Is it still the same old challenge that we're just trying to get better and better at?
We've we put in some strong governance processes that all starts with everything has to be in an SBAR format that goes to our president's council first. So that's the first step, I guess, first hurdle to go through and get funding approval. Then it goes through something that we call phase gate. So that's our TMO and other stakeholders that look at the projects to see if we're able to support it, staff it, application rationalization, and all of that. So if that gate and hurdle then is achieved, we put it through IT governance that then looks at the technology, the ecosystem, how it integrates. Again, do we have anything that's similar to that? And that's where we do our security risk assessment as well as AI assessment to that as well, to really understand, is there a component of AI baked into it? If it is, how's it being used? There's 15 different criteria that we're looking at, from security to the hallucinations to a bunch of different stuff that's really a multifaceted questionnaire that we encompass from a lot of our various stakeholders. So once we go through that, before any contracts officially sign, I then have to sign off as the CISO and DocuSign before it goes to our CIO and executive team to sign off. So we really have that all baked into our culture to really make sure that we're buying the right things aren't sliding through the cracks, as you said before, because again, with COVID, that's where I think we got into a lot of our application debt. People were buying things to solve problems versus, I guess, being more tactical than strategic on what we needed. So now that we have our strategic plan, strong governance, that we're able to really filter in components that we have coming in.
So you feel like you're catching things and that you're not finding out things outside, because it's a great process if you can get everything to move through it. So my question would be, are you catching everything? Have you put in those stop gaps at different departments where things get caught and then funneled back to the proper process? Or do you still pick up stuff that gets around it sometimes?
I think we're doing a college A, so I'm not going to say we're perfect, but I feel
Oh,
like we're doing very, very well. So we're in the 90 percentile of catching things, and I
oh,
think that
good.
that's just gone through to just the buy-in of the organization, having compliance, privacy, finance, legal, contracting, all of there to help be those kind of cohorts and gatekeeping. So
Very good. Damien, what are your thoughts?
I think that's actually a real good point, right? You have to be able to see it in order to run it through that governance process. And so without the visibility, a lot of these shadow AI, shadow IT apps kind of pop up. And to Brian's point, a lot of these clinicians and surgeons are just trying to provide patient care. And the last thing we want to do as security people or IT folks is to stop that patient care or impact that patient care. So I think really having that visibility to see where some of this data is going, because obviously we don't necessarily want to have any privacy or PHI information going up to public AI models. If we can see those and maybe coach the user in real time, I think that gives it a better user experience. And then you could enter into your governance, your checks and security risk assessments.
Damien, let's talk the nitty gritty here about PHI, and I want to. This is a dirty little truth of healthcare. Um, I've been told by people that there is a problem with finding out where all your PHI is, because then you got to do something about it. So, we want to know where it is, but do we really want to know where it is? I would just like your thoughts on, is that an odd little undercurrent in healthcare?
I've I've heard that come up a few times, but after you start talking about it, if you close your eyes, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think what you want to be able to do is at least identify where your data is, where your most treasured data is, so that you can put controls and protections around that without, having an unexpected incident. You just like I said, if you close your eyes, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So you shouldn't be scared to actually go out and identify these. It should actually enable you to go and put the right controls in and put the effort in the locations where your data is at rest.
All right, let's focus on that a little bit. This idea of data. Um, and Chris, let's start with you. What I want to ask you is, it seems to me in conversations I'm having that CISOs and CIOs need the AI, the dynamics of AI have brought these roles much closer together with data professionals and data leaders. Now we often have chief data officers. So a relationship that may have been somewhat distant before has become much closer because of this idea of putting data into these LLMs and different prompts. So I'd like you to discuss the idea of the importance or the changing of these relationships and what IT leaders can do to develop that relationship and to make it strong, because now there's such a link between data movements and security.
I think it's definitely critical for there to be relationships. And I think actually Steve's earlier point did a good job of illustrating that. He was talking about his governance program. He talked about how he had all these different stakeholders have to work together in order to get the program to operate. I think that's a real illustration of what you need. The reality is that the CISO can't do security in isolation. He's part of the rest of the org, and every part of the organization has some role they play in security. And it's really important to get everybody to work together and to get everybody on the same page, or the security program's not going to succeed. And to your point, you have more and more data becoming involved, more and more data that people want to put through various AIs. And I think it's going to require a change in how people think in terms of a lot of the security risk you see with AI hasn't changed. If you take a look at things like injection attacks and other stuff that you see in applications, they're still there in the modern AI models, but there are whole classes of attacks around data and model poisoning and attack vectors like that that are not traditionally part of a lot of what CISOs are thinking about. So I do think it takes a lot of understanding on both sides, both on the data side to improve their knowledge of security, but as well as on the security side to better understand data and how it's used in order to provide the appropriate guardrails around the data.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I'm wondering about, as you know, the dynamics of this. There's got to be some education going towards the data leaders, because they may not even realize the implications of some of the things they're doing. Like compliance, privacy, and security. Those they have to have everyone has to know the importance of everyone else's role in what they're doing. So I wonder if you think, as a security leader, or for security leaders in healthcare organizations, should they do outreach? Maybe those relationships aren't there. Maybe the governance isn't there because the data folks don't even think, hey, I need to, run this stuff by other people now. So, Chris, I'd like your thoughts on, from a security leader point of view, what do you need the data leaders to understand?
To answer the first part about outreach and education, I'm always big on tabletops as a way to establish those conversations initially. One of the things I really like to do is actually to walk through a simulated event pertaining to whatever the area is, in this case, AI. And as you watch one of those issues unfold in real time, you'll often see a lot of the people in different verticals realize how their vertical might be impacted and why a certain security initiative is actually important. So one of the things I'm big with on starting these kinds of conversations is to actually walk through a tabletop of all the appropriate stakeholders in the room. And you'll begin to see how a lot of these issues surface and people realize the importance of the various issues. So that's the approach I like to take early on. I do think, on the data side, they do need to think more about security, data quality, and ways security can be used to preserve data quality. So you can start to build some of the bridges there, showing how security can actually improve the quality of the data. Because essentially, for any kind of computer output, if it's garbage in, it's going to be garbage out. And security is a way to ensure that it's not garbage going into the model. So there's a lot of controls you can actually put in place that actually enhance the scientific utility of data.
Well, that's really interesting. I never thought about that. The idea that security can help data quality. So it's a very interesting point. Steve, your thoughts?
No, I think that's Chris hit the nail on the head on a lot of that. And I think that goes back to, I'm going to use kind of the theme of governance on that we've bucketed into really looking at things from business data, primarily stuff that's living in Microsoft. Clinical research, we know that's varied kind of all over the place, something that we're governing with going to a new standardized tool for that. Patient, which we know primarily lives in Epic, and then like our financial system data. So I think that the data helps drive our various protection strategies, because we're getting into like, are we blocking from a DLP perspective? Are we doing de-identification? Are we doing role-based access to that? So it's really about being a seat at the table. And I think that's really where the CISO role has evolved into, making sure that we're partnered with all those stakeholders you said, Anthony. So that's part of our GRC. Compliance encompasses our data governance committee as well. So we have the research people, we have the compliance and privacy, we have the clinical, we have finance, we have all of those stakeholders at the table. So we're kind of all on the same sheet of music to that, because that's really the only way that we're going to be successful in that. And agree, wholeheartedly with Chris that good data governance, good data protection strategies also help really in the cleanliness of data, making sure we're having good sources, that we're tracking data, and it really makes sure that everybody's doing their homework on making sure that the data stewards and data owners and all of that are really attributed to that. So it just overall brings in good hygiene, and I think AI is kind of forcing our hand into, like we did with the digital transformation, to more of a data transformation on making sure we have more governance and ownership in those respected areas.
Excellent. Very good. Brian?
So I got to go back to your earlier question about just do we want to know where all our PHI is, right? So I think it is that piece, because and I agree on the governance side. Part of it too is knowing where your data sits, right? So we've done a lot of work on data classification, understanding that, giving that information visibility. So we know, okay, where is it at rest? How is it in motion? Where is it going? And how is it being utilized? So we could then exactly that information is empower our data owners to understand what should we be doing around the controls around those aspects. So it's not just a cybersecurity only plan, because the thought process is this, security is always just going to block. But the whole point of that information is taking all that data, help enable everybody to make a much broader decision about how we should operate and what's our risk associated with that. And then, making sure that then we have the right level, exactly those, what are those DLP controls, so that's understood. And then, having a strong partnership with privacy and compliance, going through those, because they have also different opportunity or different outreaches, and have it from a different lens. It's not always just coming from a security only lens, it's coming from others. And then being part of, we do have a data governance committee here and an AI now governance committee as well, kind of walking through. So understanding those, now that we're expanding, what are those level of risk, making sure that we have that we're providing information. So when we look at new onboarding any new AI tools, for instance, we're looking and saying, okay, let's take a look at there's a number of security questions that we're going through and verifying. We have a weighted process. So it actually has, if that becomes a low score, that it will actually negate that ability going forward. So, but we do look at the business impact. What are we doing? What's its value? Is there, same thing, is there a like tool that could be, that it's already existing? And is this truly really going to help modernize and optimize where we're going? Or is it just kind of another buzzword process as well that's gonna, that everybody wants to jump on? So but to me, I think it's, in order to have the right level of governance for us is to make sure we have the right level of visibility and metrics around how we capture our data today and how it's being used to help facilitate those discussions.
All right, very good, Brian. A lot of the discussions I'm having and hearing, especially around data quality from data leaders, have to do with the idea that it's just impossible for sort of a central data leaders, the centralized data function, to clean up data. They need to coach and counsel the users, the department, the people actually whose data it is. It's their data, and it's sort of just a way to view that. Do you view it the same way from security, in the sense that this is your data? I'm here to help you understand how to secure it, how it needs to be moved around, but I'm not going to be able to secure everything from over here.
Right.
Right? It's just a viewpoint of ownership that seems to make sense to me, certainly on the data quality side.
No, and I think it is, to be honest, I think it's those data owners, and this is part of that piece. How do we help enable them to understand that, to make those right decisions? So they're the ones, I can't secure their data if they don't know how they want to manage it, right? And what it is, right? So, but I'm going to show, here are our capabilities. Here's about how we can manage it for you. Here's the security capabilities that exist within us, looking at either from like I said, labeling, protection, DLP, other aspects, and where we go. But I want them to make that decision about how, because it's at the end of the day, it's their business, it's their their need to support that, how that data is being used. So for me, I look at, we need to be enablers of them and help them, but they're the ones that primarily should be driving that discussion. So that's a piece to get there. Sometimes I don't know that everybody has that same feeling. Sometimes I think it's like, well, hey, you're the
Right.
CISO. You're gonna, this isn't your job. Like
Right.
it's kind of I think it's actually, like I said, we're more there to help kind of walk through and enable them to do what it is that they need to manage their obligations for what they're doing with that data.
Yeah, Damien, it's interesting just to go with that data quality theme, and then you can take it wherever you want. What's happening is sort of centralized AI functions want to help build chatbots, a different agentic AI for departments so that people who have to interact with those departments can do it in a more efficient way and an automated way. For example, around HR and finding policies or things like that. But in order for those chatbots to be effective, the data has to be straightened out. And the centralized functions are not going to be able to do that. It has to be put to the users. It's just this sort of general dynamic of getting the departments and the operators to understand that none of this can work without them. So if you want to jump in on that, or overall your thoughts on what you're
Yeah,
hearing.
I think Brian said something really important there. We are enabling the users or enabling the business. I think that's key because if security gets viewed as hampering the business or stopping it and stopping users from accessing the data or utilizing the data, they'll go around us, right? That's the bottom line. And so working with these users to understand what data do they need, where are they trying to send it to. If you have inline controls for DLP, maybe you stop, thousands of records from going to Gen AI, but one or two might be okay because that's within the risk tolerance and it's maybe needed at that time. But yeah, if you stop everything and you just put up a big wall to say, look, I'm not going to allow any of our users to leverage AI or to use their data the way they'd like to use the data, they're just going to go around you. So you need that seat at the table, and the way you do that is through partnerships and discussion. But a blanket restriction is not going to work for a lot of these organizations. I think a year ago, maybe a year, 18 months ago, when Gen AI just really started to become popular, I think a lot of us just were scared and we just put up a lot of blockers. You fast forward to now, and you're talking about, well, agentic AI. Yeah, there's more expansion in the use of AI. There's a lot of tools that have AI built into them. Um, how do we deal with that? And right now, I think it's about becoming a partner, building those relationships, like everyone has said here, across the organization and then being able to put adaptive policies depending on risk. I think that's key. If you can identify what the risk is and put the applicable policy and controls in place at that time, that would be hugely beneficial to all of these organizations.
So, Damien, do you get the sense that security professionals have been too restrictive in healthcare or not restrictive enough? I mean, which way do you
I've seen
think
it.
they're
I've seen it
erring?
on, yeah, I've seen it on opposite ends,
Uh-huh.
believe it. So even today, right, I think there's a lot of hospital systems that will say, look, we don't allow any AI, any Gen AI, and then we block it. The problem with that approach is that it's a whack-a-mole. I only block what I know, and you don't necessarily know all of the Gen AI tools. There's hundreds of them now, not just the big players. So that kind of approach doesn't necessarily work. And then on the opposite side, uh, I think they're starting to realize that, hey, there's a risk here. And last year, I did come across a couple of CTOs within healthcare that were encouraging their users to use Gen AI. And I think that's a good thing, but you have to make sure you have proper controls. Like I said, if you're sending up thousands of records to do analysis, just make sure that it is your corporate Gen AI, not a public one, right? There's risks there that we have to talk about. So I do see it on both ends of it. Today, a majority are in between somewhere where they recognize that we do need to leverage AI within our hospitals and for patient care, but we also need to protect their data as well.
Yeah. Brian, you came from banking, right?
I did.
So I had at the Charmful Farm I was at, there was a CISO up there who came from banking fairly recently. And one of the dynamics that came up was you can't come into healthcare with a banking CISO mindset, right? You're going to blow up, you're going to be gone in 2 months because it's a different animal. You don't get to put up the kind of red lights that you could in banking where you have so much regulation behind you and there's just no tolerance for going outside and around things. Healthcare is a much different animal. You have to have a different mindset as a security professional, which Damien referenced. But again, the overarching thing that we always talk about here is your job is not to make risk decisions. Your job is to communicate risk to those who will make the decisions. So if you want to touch on that kind of dynamic a little bit, and we want to help security professionals, assuming they've been in healthcare for a while, maybe some haven't. We want to help them have the right mental framework for doing their jobs and not get them fired in 2 months because they told Dr. So and so to get lost that he couldn't get into the system today. Anyway, your thoughts.
Yeah, no. So I spent 23 years in the financial services sector, and then when I went to my first role, actually moving into a CISO in another healthcare organization, same thing. Meet with the as at the time the interview with the CEO, his concern was, hey, you're coming from the financial services sector, and this is healthcare. It's different. And I at the time I didn't, I said, well, I mean, security is agnostic the way I always look at it, right? So we have to look at it there. But I said I could help in bringing the capabilities we had forward, but also it did make me realize the same thing. I had to kind of understand those different dynamics, right? In the banking sector, it was the security of no, right? No, because it was, that's we're not going to do it. Regulation, those risks. The bank was very, very risk adverse, and that was the rule, right? But that doesn't flow as well into the healthcare space because it's a different piece. Hey, we're protecting everybody's money. That's great. Here we're protecting patients' lives, right? So we've got a different focus. We have to be understanding about those needs, and there's going to be, and that was kind of the same thing. Then I came into we can't be the organization of no. We have to be an organization of, how can we help, right? Understand those needs and balance off those components and figure out how we could both do things. So I would say, how can we do it securely and still enabling the business and the hospital to run and operate, right, and doing that work. So sometimes it's maybe understanding like for a period of risk, and then okay, now here's how we could do a roadmap for improvements in the long term, looking at and saying, okay, this is where this is what needs to be put in place to help us better secure that process, because there are also risks if we don't do that. Those patient data loss, information, we don't want that to happen. That doesn't look good for us from a healthcare system if we're not maintaining our patient data, integrity of our patient data. But help, like I said, understand those side of things, work closely with the CMIOs and CMOs, and understanding what is it that we need to do and being kind of open, understand their needs, and then and let it was the first thing I come in. I'm not going to be the CISO of no, and which that was to be honest. In the financial service sector, I was the deputy CISO on the org one time told me that it was actually too nice, and I was, don't work with don't work with the business. We just say no and don't make it happen. I said that's not how it works. So I was able to use that same idea in the healthcare, and I think it was much more successful.
Excellent. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Agree with that. Love that term. I've always said that in security, especially this day and age, we can't be the department of no, but how. There's always going to be instances that we're going to need to say no, stand our ground, etc. And I like to kind of equate it to like branches of government. Security shouldn't be dictating all components, doing the blocking, setting the strategy, doing everything around that. You need to have other stakeholders at the table. So I say it's the 33% rule. So security has a 33% stakeholder compliance and privacy, and then our data team, because again, us collectively should be able to do all of that. Of course, our data team is going to tell us about the data governance aspects, privacy and compliance are going to tell us the do's and don'ts, and security is going to enact blocking based off of that. Because if you leave it to a CISO, we're going to block everything. So that's how you're going to be successful. So that's really where that partnership and collaboration comes into play. And that's just, again, how we've evolved. And I think really where AI is taking us on, making sure that we're becoming more embedded into the business and really how the CISO role is evolving.
Steve, any thoughts on making sure those relationships are strong? I mean, it's just meetings, phone calls. Like, how do you get to that comfortable working relationship where, I guess it's a little less stiff and formal, and it can be more like popping in. It can be just exchanging ideas. I mean, what are your keys to having great relationships with these key people?
I think I've been lucky. The first part, luck a little bit. I've had an amazing compliance and privacy officer at all of the organizations that I've come to, and I think really coming to the table and level setting too up front with some of these roles, because you can't be successful without having that collaboration and partnership on that. We can't, because if one person's trying to do it one way, you're going to have collisions, things are going to be done differently. A siloed approach never works for this, because that's when the true business interruption comes. So coming as a collective voice also brings power within the organization that we've seen. It's easier for compliance and privacy to take a stance when something's blocked versus them saying it's security. And then understanding more that we've vetted this as part of the business side with data and analytics. So that's really where we're going on data and analytics. Currently in our organization, we just hired a great new leader on that she's setting the AI strategy, seeing how that's all fitting into our new data platform, helping drive a lot of the data governance, all in the confinements of what our privacy and compliance, regulatory, risk appetite, etc. And that's actually spawned us into creating more of an enterprise risk management approach. So we finally had enough of this stuff. Enterprise risk management for a long time has been a challenge in healthcare. That's really helped level that up, that it's GRC, data, all of this becomes an organizational risk that we need to be able to manage at that level. So now we have another stakeholder, our ERM lead. So we're building a consortium to really have that, cross collaborative group to really help speak that one voice. And again, it's just about level setting, relationship building. That's key to everything we do, and a little salesmanship too. You always got to be the vacuum salesman in
Yeah,
security to make sure that, you have a seat at the table.
Just to
I love
build on
the
that,
idea. Go ahead, Chris.
just to build on that a bit too, I think security is often more of a business enabler than people give it credit for. And I think you can often find that common language with different stakeholders in the organization. So for example, earlier we talked about how security can actually lead to data quality improvements. That's an example of security as a business enabler, where it actually helps that vertical do their job better. Similarly with patient safety, security is a patient safety enabler. If a ransomware attack or something else were to happen, it impacts patient care. So security, in a sense, helps prevent adverse outcomes for patients. There's a lot of ways in which security can be an enabler in business, and it's a matter of learning to speak that language with the various different stakeholders to show how a particular security initiative actually enhances what they want to do rather than becomes a stumbling block for them.
I love it, and that sounds like what Steve's talking about putting on the sales hat, right, Steve? So, Chris, you're
Yes.
talking about the sales hat. See it from the other's point of view. Show them the upside of engaging security and how it can improve what they're trying to do. Damien, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the Department of No, because I started to talk about the other no, right? Not NO, but KNOW, where now we need to kind of know where that data is and where the data is moving and transitioning. Because with the data sprawl moving everywhere, it helps to understand the business to help it be enabled. And so, yeah, if we can coin that term, Department of No, KNOW, instead of,
I like that.
yeah.
You got to get marketing in on that. They'll make up some signs and things like that. Department of KNOW. Good stuff. All right, I feel like doing our I've talked enough. I feel like doing our Ask a Co-Panelist segment. So, Damien, I'm going to start with you. Do you have a question for one or more of your co-panelists? You can either direct it specifically to someone or to all.
No, I think the governance, the conversation, Steve, I think that was really, really important. Do you feel like there's always work to be done in terms of governance around AI apps? Do you think there's things that are missing because we just don't see it in our industry?
Yeah, I do. And I think that goes back to that build versus buy mentality. Like our group has done a great job at looking, because we're again an Epic shop, on looking at what can we do in Epic first. And then if there's other, supplemental systems that we need to look at, let's look at that. Because again, why are we trying to bring things out of the core brick and mortar of what's being done in Epic? So we have a great leader in that point that's gone through and looked at that. And it's the same as finance or some of these ancillary, ambient listening, a lot of those other components. And then, AI ingestion, and then more just generic usage like Copilot and other stuff that we're using. So it's just really important to make sure you're governing, have an understanding of how people are trying to use it. And if there's a need, a necessity to bring it up is an idea. So we just went live with ServiceNow, that we're going to start to incorporate that concept a little bit more, that, we have these baseline functionalities. We know AI is continuing to evolve continuously. Like, now, how can we start to think about how we can plug different elements into that? And does it fit into one of these buckets that we're looking at? So I know our data and analytics leader is working on that hot and heavy in collaboration with a lot of us on our AI strategy. So exciting times.
Chris, anything you want to add on that idea about governance?
Not so much governments. I guess the question that I would have for everybody is
Oh,
we
go
talked
ahead.
a lot about security, I guess, around bringing AI into the organization. What about the idea of security, AI being used against security to attack the organization?
Brian, why don't we start with you?
So actually, it's interesting. We've seen that. I've already seen that actually within some of the, we'll call it more spear phishing emails, right? So they're getting much more sophisticated and complex. Right? I think I've seen some stats that AI spear phishing is 40% better than any some of the best elite red teamers, right? So there's some information there. So we're it's getting there. So educating users about those areas of risks, going through that. There's attacks recently. There was about some nation state attacks on AI that used AI internally to kind of harness data from organizations. So to me, we've I think, have we built any our own rule books or playbooks to kind of modeling that? I think it's always like for information instant response is kind of build that foundational framework and continue to build on it. So AI is going to help maybe give potentially an adversary easier ability to access that data. So we need to just be more cognizant about how and what they're using. And, hey, if I'm now seeing information coming from systems that are housing our AI modeling and they're doing something outside the norm that we wouldn't see, we've got to put the brakes on immediately, right? And look at that, look for data exfiltration, because that's the other piece too. How are they sending that data out? Making sure we have that visibility on that side, and having the overall visibility between, hey, whether those associated risks that they can do, what are the controls, how quickly we could respond to those actions. And that's what I said, we actually been now putting in like agentic AI components and really doing that on our, evaluating these different alerts to make sure we could do it, because it's happening, it's going on obviously a more rapid scale.
Steve or Damien, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to use it to combat the same way it's being used against us. So I think Brian hit the, nail on the head on the components, that phishing is almost perfect. You can look for misspellings and other components, but I also think it's created a whole new generation of hacker, because it enables people to level up. Somebody that would have low, no tech can now use coding and capability and set a lot of these AI agents. And I think what Brian has said, that was that Chinese government espionage attack that was the first autonomous attack using Claude on that too. So that was something that we were looking at and monitoring, saying it was just a matter of time until they were able to use just AI and more or less trick the coding in the sense to that. So that's going to always be something that we're going to have to be able to leverage, almost autonomous actioning in real time on that too, and kind of goes into our adaptive defense in depth strategy we're going to have to continue to evolve with.
Damien, anything you want to add there?
I think that's a great point. I mean, that the adaptive security model is probably the way we need to go, because the attackers will leverage AI or other ways to just find holes within your cyber defense. And so if you have ways that you could just morph, right, and be able to adapt based off of what we're seeing in terms of attacks or risks, it would make us more efficient and hopefully faster to react. We're not waiting for, a week or 2 weeks to implement a new security policy to block something.
Excellent. Steve, do you have a question for one or both of your or more of your co-panelists?
I do for Damien. So I know we're talking a lot of in healthcare. I think we do it better than any industry on information share between various health systems. So how, as a vendor partner, can we do better to help you guys develop tool sets, etc.?
That's a really good question. I like the fact that healthcare is very collaborative. So from that perspective, making sure that you're securely sharing the data or sharing it with the right entities is always key. I think with organizations like yourselves, it's really just about bringing your partners and your vendors to the table and having those conversations. That everyone should be open to coming to the table and just talking about how each security protocol or vendor tool fits into the entire overall security posture, right? These days, we have a lot of overlap with different tools across different security platforms. But at the end of the day, there should be integration and communication across all of the tool sets, or else we can't, like I said, we can't do the morphing of our cyber defense. We can't automatically readjust. And if you think about it, like protecting a castle, well, we don't have data in a single location anymore. But using that approach where you might have different types of soldiers, different types of defense mechanisms like the wall and the moat, and they all need to be working together to protect the castle, right? So I think speaking with your vendors and partnering with them and bringing them to the table to help you strategize, I think that's probably the best effective use of those relationships.
Excellent. Brian, do you have a question for one or more of your co-panelists?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pose it to Chris and or Steve on. So we've talked about. I know Steve, you've talked a lot about governance. How often do you meet as a governing process when you're looking at AI in organizations? And you've because obviously I see this rapidly going forward. Is it, so typically I know like monthly cycles or like they can seem long in between. What are you seeing as a kind of a right fit?
Chris, you want to go first?
I think it's becoming more frequent. I think as organizations seek to adopt more and more AI, you're seeing more and more of a need for those meetings. So I think the cadence is increasing. I've seen it over time, go from like a quarterly meeting to something monthly, and I suspect it's going to go more frequent as more and more of those applications want to be adopted.
Very good, Steve.
We're doing it weekly right now under our structure because we have an intake with our TMO we just built and rolled out. So we're looking at all projects that are coming on, meet every Tuesday, Thursday. But it's really ongoing with like the security risk assessments on that side, kind of going in between from that. But from a governance and committee standpoint, we have some that are monthly, some that are quarterly. So they really vary. And again, we can do them ad hoc as needed as part of that. So it's really, I think they're changing and evolving continuously on that. But
I think there's I've seen that, right, go from quarterly down to monthly, and it really depends on your visibility into some of these AI tools that are being used. It's very rare that a user will come to you and say, "Can I use this application?" A lot of times they come to the committee because we've observed it in the wild, and then it becomes a topic to talk about. And so bringing that down into, well, can I see it? And should we talk about it, really dictates how often that committee meets.
So here, just and again, and I appreciate that information too, and that's how we've been seeing. One one of the ways for us to help facilitate, we also created an AI task force focused on separate, like it's part of, they're part of committee members, but they're also, let's go through, analyze that on a, yeah, and some of it's also sharing, knowledge sharing, right? Before they bring up and try to wait into, hey, put together your whole plan, get it all through this process, get it involved and reviewed as part of the committee to get an approval. Let's help with the task force to kind of understand all those, points first, right? Let's review our policy with them, go through underwriting. Do we do some of that out of due diligence? And so that's meeting much more on a, I would call it ad hoc basis, and we're trying to get them, information out to facilitate it. So it's not just this once a month meeting to get one or two, security technologies reviewed at a committee level and then, move it forward. It's still a little bit more of an ad hoc task force based approach. So just sharing that too, if anybody has done that in their organizations.
All right, excellent. Well, we're going to go with our lightning round of final thoughts, final piece of advice. Yeah, I think we're just going to frame it up that way. Your best piece of advice for people dealing with some of the topics we discussed today. Chris, we're going to start with you.
Sure. I think both from the perspective of putting guardrails around AI applications in the environment, as well as protecting yourself from the malicious use of AI against your organization, I think compensating controls become more important than ever before. So I would encourage organizations to kind of redefine the vulnerability management process to ask not just about patching, but also ask the question of what compensating controls could have stopped the exploitation of this particular issue. I think that'll become more and more important. And if you put the proper compensating controls in place, you'll have some proactive protection against whatever the next 0 day is, or the next security issue around the corner.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve.
I think it's important to be a collaborator, storyteller, and have a seat at the table, because that's how we're going to continue to be successful. And I loved kind of the theme, and to hear that out of everyone, that we're going to be not the department of no, but how, because it's really important. And we know that, the AI is going to bring a lot of benefit to our organizations, and especially with the headwinds coming. So it's very important to just embrace that, be a good partner, and leverage your resources in the organization.
Excellent. Very good. Brian?
I think with the proliferation of AI tools being put out from a SaaS capability, make sure you have visibility about what's being used and how it's being used, and having good controls around that before you have any loss of data. I think that's a very important process right now.
Excellent. Damien?
Look, I think security needs to get away from being reactive to being more proactive, like we've discussed here. It comes with enabling the business, making sure you have that visibility, and getting a seat at that table.
All right, very good. Well, that was wonderful. That's about all we had time for today. Great discussion regarding continuing education. You can use the final slide in this deck. You'll get an email when the on-demand recording of this event is ready for viewing. If you want to work with us, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox from our team, and you can go to our website to register for upcoming panels. With that, I want to thank this amazing wonderful panel, Brian Cayer, Chris Frenz, Steve Ramirez, and Damian Chung. I want to thank Netscope for making the event possible, and you for attending. And with that, everybody, have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.